Coming up, Jeremy joins the pod. We talk about why nice guys finish last and why jerks don't in the NBA. The NBA playoffs so far have been very, very entertaining. We had Knicks Cavs, which was disappointing on my end, but still a good series. Celtics possibly in the driver's seat after the Bucks fall to the Heat. Golden State pushed to Game 7, and we'll talk about what we think might happen as the playoffs shake out. And then we'll talk about some post-grad life and AI maybe taking over the world. This is the Dropline Podcast, episode 19. Welcome. Welcome, Jeremy Guerin, to the pod. Jeremy has been here before. He was actually the person who actually got me into doing podcasts. He started Hail Marys and Hoops with Jeff Pratt last summer, and I would hop on with them every now and then, talk about football and basketball and everything else in between. And now Jeremy is here with us today to give us some expert insight into the NBA. Jeremy, well, you know what? Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for those who don't know you?
Well, for those who don't know me, I definitely like sports. I think it's kind of evident if you're looking on any sort of video platform that you can see behind me. Got a nice wall full of Boston sports stuff. It's kind of what I'm a fan of first, but I do like all sports. We are talking NBA today. I'm excited to do it. My Celtics are, as you said in the pregame intro type of thing, in the driver's seat, and I fully agree with that. So we're definitely going to get down into that. If you can believe it, Anton, it wasn't actually last summer. It was the Jeff's podcast has now been going for 2 years now. That's how old we are.
Wow.
We are, the years are now starting to mesh together, which is both good and kind of scary. But I'm happy to get into it. So let's go.
Right, so I guess we just hop right into things and talk about Knicks Cavs, which I actually thought might have been a really entertaining series at the beginning of the playoffs. I thought they were probably the two most equally matched teams in terms of just the actual talent and the matchups. But as it turns out, the Knicks are better than I thought, a lot better than I thought, and the Cavs maybe not as good as I thought. That could be a hometown bias thing. But I'm going to kick it to you, Jeremy. I mean, I'm biased. I like the Cavs. I think they can win the championship every year. What did you see from this series? Like, what was your biggest takeaway?
I think it honestly started in Game 1. I'm totally with you, first of all. Heading into the series, heading into the first round even, I said that this is going to be the most exciting first-round series of the 8 available. I knew that the Kings and the Warriors are going to match up. I thought that was going to be a good series, but I thought the Knicks Cavs was going to go 7, and it was going to be decided maybe even in overtime in Game 7. I was that confident in this matchup on paper because I thought that there were holes on each team, but each team had strengths that could counter their opponent. The Cavs did not show up. We could start with that. I think if the Cavs had played better, it would have been a better series. It's not as if you're talking about there was this gross talent disparity and stuff like that. I mean, let's face it, the Cavs had the more wins, home court, and the best player in the series, and they lost. So that tells me that they underachieved for starters, like right off the bat. Very easy to identify for me. I underestimated the Cavs' lack of wing depth.
Yeah.
I saw a tweet, I don't remember, I may have been Kevin O'Connor or The Ringer, kind of bringing up the fact that if you have Jetty Osman, Karis LeVert, and Danny Green, I don't even remember who
Isaac
the third guy
Okoro,
was.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, there you go, exactly. Okoro being the third guy to try and get you through 4 playoff rounds, that just ain't going to happen. Especially with how wing dominant the NBA is. But hey, the Cavs chose to build their team this way. Go really big in the front court and have very good guards. It just didn't work out this time.
I think that was actually the biggest thing for me. It wasn't necessarily the wing. I didn't actually know. Throughout the whole season, I felt like the Cavs weren't necessarily relying on production from Karis LeVert or Jetty Osman or even, Danny Green was a very late season acquisition, but the real strength of our team lied in our front court, in Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. And if you looked at just the box score, some of the offensive rebounding disparities, unexcusable, especially for 2 7-footers, getting out-rebounded by Josh Hart. What? Mitchell Robinson? That's a whole other story.
Mitchell Robinson's actually pretty good. I knew that he was good. He's not necessarily offensively inclined, per se. He's not going to go out and get you 20 and 10 a game, but he is very good at offensive rebounding. And I thought that he was going to, split with Jared Allen. But I completely agree with you. When you throw a second 7-footer and Evan Mobley into the mix, the Cavs should have been a lot better on the boards than they were, especially in key moments. I think back to Game 4 in New York, where the Cavs are they're trying to scrape back. They're down like 3 minutes to go. somebody hoists up a shot, Julius Randle throws up a prayer that misses, and Josh Hart gets the offensive rebound ahead of Jared Allen. And that's just a killer, because then he puts it out to Brunson. Brunson hits a three. MSG's going crazy, and that's a backbreaker.
It's a backbreaker to play defense, very solid defense, for 20 seconds of the shot clock and then give up the offensive rebound. And this is sort of why I brought up the first topic, which is why nice guys finish last and jerks don't in the NBA. I want to take a look at Jared Allen especially. I mean, his reputation in the league is he is a nice guy. He won't talk smack to you, right? He's kind of like Andrew Luck. He's kind of just complimenting everyone else. Oh, nice play, big man. Or he's like, dapping up the other team and stuff. And while that's good from a culture standpoint, why it's good to have a guy who just sort of lifts everyone's spirits, his performance in the playoffs, I mean, he looked scared. And he said it himself afterwards. He said the lights were a lot brighter than expected. And I think about players like Dylan Brooks, Marcus Smart, or, can you give me another player that's like
Draymond Green?
Draymond Green, exactly. A player that isn't necessarily always consistent. And even those guys, people who are fans of those teams, kind of have a love-hate relationship with them. But still, those kind of players have that edge. They have that dog in them, so to speak, that gives your team the push, the mental edge to win. And I felt like Jared Allen, if you watch, especially if you just watch on those possessions, what he's doing on the boards when the shot's going up, he's just kind of like watching. He doesn't know what to do. He was totally, I would say, shocked by Mitchell Robinson's physicality. And I want to commend Mitchell Robinson actually for a moment. I mean, that guy was moving. He was hustling. And I want to say that it's maybe a coaching thing, that Mitchell Robinson was never once in foul trouble. How can that be the case?
Yeah, that's shocking.
He was the only one killing us on the boards. And if we put that guy in foul trouble, it's over. But I wanted to, Jeremy, what do you think about that? What do you think about having a guy on your team that you just need a guy on your team that's like, just has that dog?
So I think where I would push back on your not philosophy, what's the word I'm looking for? Your take, I guess. Where I would push back is that I don't necessarily correlate nice to having the quote unquote dog as the other end of the spectrum. I more put it as you need one of these gritty guys. And I think that the Cavs lack that. Now, I think that what these gritty guys do, Draymond Green's a great example, Marcus Smart's a good example, Dylan Brooks not so much, but the other two especially I'm going to focus on here, is that they set the tone for your team. They may not be the best player, and believe me, those two are not the best players on their respective teams, but you know that when you have to, let's say you're up 20 and somebody cuts the lead to 12, somebody's on a run, you can count on these guys to show on the court the hustle, the fight, not quite set the tone, because that's what your best player is supposed to do, in my mind, in the NBA, but they can still provide that little bit extra where it's like, I need to have a guy like that in my corner if I'm going to go win. Maybe they stop the bleeding by having a nice assist on a bucket when the other team's on like a 12-0 run. It's not so much nice, it's more just having the wherewithal to withstand whatever the playoffs are going to give you. Frankly, if we're being honest, I thought Donovan Mitchell was going to do a better job of that.
Agreed.
I think that he be having the playoff experience. Now, he's never made it to the Western Conference Finals when he was in Utah, but he's still seen a lot of playoff games. He's been in the league for, I want to say, like 6 years now. That sounds about right. 6 or 7 years. I think he came in when Jalen came in. So he should be better at adapting to that playoff atmosphere, and he was miserable in the last 3 games in this series.
There was a moment in game 1 where Donovan Mitchell, he making a lot of hustle plays. I mean, that was the game he played really well. He put up, I think, 40 that game.
Yeah.
But there was a moment where he tries to save a ball going out of bounds, and he ends up jumping like over the first row or over the scorer's table. And I think he lands a little, he like jumps off of the table, I think, into the crowd. And I think he lands a little weird or something, because he comes out of the crowd. He's not like, he doesn't like burst out of the crowd. He's kind of like hobbling a little bit. He kind of comes out a little slow, a little gingerly. And I wondered if that was a moment where he was sort of playing through something, and the rest of the series he was sort of playing, through maybe like a tweaked ankle of some sort. I mean, he was struggling a little bit with some lower body stuff towards the end of the season. And I was watching the games, and he just didn't have that burst that like I'm gonna get past anybody kind of speed in the rest of the series. But yes, I think Donovan Mitchell, he didn't really show up, and this is also, a Cavs construction thing. It's sort of the last thing on the Cavs.
Yeah.
I think the Knicks figured out Evan Mobley has no bag. As good as Evan Mobley might be, he has no bag. That guy cannot produce on the offensive end. He looks scared. Jared Allen's pretty much like, as long as you take away the lobs, you're good. And then outside of that, leave Isaac Okoro open, leave Jetty open, and then you only have to guard 2 guys, and they're 2 smaller guys. They're not like these 2 physically imposing 6'8" kind of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown kind of players where they can get their shot over anybody. No, Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland need space, and they need their bigs in order to produce, and they just didn't have it. So Knicks with a moving on to the second round, want to commend them for their toughness and their grit. And the Cavs season ends in disappointment. But moving on, we're going to talk about the Celtics. As someone who's lived with Celtics fans for a few years now, I've considered myself an honorary Celtics fan. And since the Cavs have been eliminated, your boy's on the green and white bandwagon. And after beating the Hawks, was it last night? No, it was 2 nights ago. The Celtics are now slated to play the Philadelphia 76ers in the second round of the playoffs. And then the winner of that series somehow plays either the Bucks. Plays either the Heat or the Knicks. Mm-hmm. Jeremy, Celtics fan, tell me, what is going through your head right now?
What's going through my head right now is that there is no excuse to not make the finals.
Right.
Making the finals has to be the bare minimum. Anything short of that is a failure. And it was a failure heading into the playoffs. It's even more so now because your biggest nemesis in the East is gone. The Bucks are out. Now, all due respect to playoff Jimmy Butler, and I know we're going to get to him later, I'm going to leave him off to the side here and say that, yes, he will be a problem. Tyler Hero is not there, and Bam Adebayo disappears for long stretches of games. There's no excuse not to beat them. The Knicks, their best player is Jalen Brunson. Again, no excuse not to beat him. As well as he played against the Cavs, you have to beat them because you have Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, all of these other guys. And then there's the Sixers. The Sixers, on paper at least, are the biggest threat remaining to the Celtics in the East. Joel Embiid's hurt. James Harden is a notorious playoff choker.
Correct.
And the Sixers have a mental block in their heads when it comes to the Celtics. The Celtics own them mentally, and they should be leveraging all of that throughout this series. I want them to not play with their food like they did against Atlanta. That series should have ended in a sweep, especially after looking at the first 2 games where I don't know if you trailed by more than 10 in the second half. I don't know if your lead was ever less than 10 in the second half of the first 2 games. Fine, game 3, all right, you knew you were going to get Atlanta's best shot because otherwise they're going to get eliminated. They made a bunch of shots. There's no excuse to blow game 5 on your home floor and not and force Embiid to play on even less rest. You gave them 3 more days. That's a problem. But, it's no use crying over spilled milk. You got to deal with what you got. Obviously, you took care of business against Atlanta. Not convincingly, I might add. It was not a great performance in game 6 until those last couple of minutes when they went nuclear. They were trailing for most of that game. There's no excuse with this team. This team was built to win a championship. This team got to the finals last year, and they added Malcolm Brogdon. They should be more experienced, better battle-tested, and have the wherewithal to make it back to the finals, and I expect nothing less from them.
Something that Bill Simmons has mentioned, that I listen to him quite a bit, and one of the things he's mentioned is Joe Mazzulla finally figured out that Derek White is the 3rd best player on the team. It's not Marcus Smart, it's Derek White. And if you watch the Celtics play, I'm surprised they don't give the ball more to Derek White. I mean, he is so consistent. He can make his own shot. He's bigger than you think. And I think generally what it is that his face looks so kind of non-threatening.
Goofy?
Yeah, kind of like almost like a, I don't know. You just don't fear that kind of face, but he is a fearsome basketball player. And I want to just talk really quickly about the Hawks. They made a big move this offseason to get DeJounte Murray. But Trae Young, there were some questions throughout the season about his leadership, about his unwillingness to adapt his style of play. And going into the playoffs, if the Hawks had been swept by the Celtics, it wouldn't have been surprising, and we probably would be talking about what did the Hawks do next. But now I'm wondering, did Trae Young play well enough for 2 games for everyone to forget about that, and for Hawks fans to buy into the idea that maybe this DeJounte Murray, Trae Young core can work?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think the Hawks are stuck. because the Hawks now have a Trae Young on a max contract, and if you trade him, you could probably get something, but it's never, you're trading a thoroughbred for ponies. Like, let's be honest. As much as I do not like Trae Young, I'll state that right out.
I don't either.
I think Trae Young is wildly overrated, but he's the best the Hawks have right now, and he's really their only chance to contention at this point, because what are you going to do? Trade him for 2 first-round picks or something like that, and maybe a little bit more, and hope that you can draft the next Trae Young? You already have one right here, you know? So they played well enough to where maybe Atlanta fans will back off the cliff a little bit. I'd say that you have to give Quinn Snyder a chance with a full year in charge instead of like 3 months to try and figure things out. That's definitely a big piece of it, because I have a lot of respect for Quinn Snyder. I think he's a great coach. I think he did the best he could with what he had in Utah, and I want to see what he can do here. But I think Atlanta right now is definitely stuck in that basketball purgatory where they're not bad enough to tank and they're not good enough to be a real contender, especially when you consider the teams in the East. The Bucks are still probably going to be very good next year. The Celtics are probably still going to be very good. Same thing with the Sixers. The Knicks, at this point, you have to rank them above. The Cavs obviously are the best defense in the league and finished 4th. So that I just listed off 5 teams already, and who knows what the Nets are going to do. They could they could blow some stuff up again. They could acquire some people. Who knows? Like, at this point, the Hawks have John Collins to trade if they want, but he's been on the block for like the last 2.5 seasons.
Yeah, come on. It's like
he's 1 month away from being on the block again. Like, you know, it just keeps going every single time. I don't really know what the Hawks can do other than stay the course and hope that Quinn can figure out the relationship between DeJounte and Trae.
Last thing on the Celtics.
Yep.
As a Celtics fan, are you worried about Jaylen Brown possibly leaving this offseason?
So my roommate and our other podcast host, Jeff, has talked about this at length with me. Basically, there's nothing to worry about if he gets an All-NBA team. If he makes one of the All-NBA teams, he's eligible for a certain max that would offer, I think, like $70 million more than any other team can offer in free agency. And no one has ever turned that down. And money talks. Like, let's be honest. You can secure generational wealth for your family, for your grandkids, all the way on down. And I know that that's probably that's very important to almost every player. Let's be honest. And why wouldn't it be? If you play in a sport where it's a finite shelf life, you're not putting in 40 years in basketball. You need to prioritize getting your money when you can. So if he makes the All-NBA team, I'm not concerned about it whatsoever. Now, if he doesn't make the All-NBA team, then it becomes a little bit more of a wrinkle. I could see him wanting to leave. I don't necessarily think he's enamored with it here. I think he still does. There's a connotation with Boston fans that I don't know if he necessarily loves. I think that he would like to play elsewhere if he could at some point in his career. When that would be, I don't know. It might be a little sooner rather than later if he doesn't make the All-NBA team. But for now, can't really deal in hypotheticals too much, I'd say, because we still have to know those teams. I think once we know who makes the All-NBA teams, I could have a better answer for you.
It's just interesting to think about how you would feel as Jaylen Brown. You are the most consistent playoff performer. You basically outplayed Jason Tatum for the whole season, yet everyone still considers the team Jason Tatum's team. That's just an interesting dynamic. I think it's going to be interesting to see it unfold. We're going to take a break. So, Jeremy, if I told you a week ago that the Miami Heat would beat the Milwaukee Bucks in 5 games, would you have believed me?
No, but I may have taken a small bet on it just to see if I could fade myself. Just because I would have been like, hey, you know what? Maybe he's telling the truth, maybe not. But I definitely wouldn't have believed you. Not a chance in hell.
First thing I want to talk about from that series is the charge Kevin Love draws. Was that a charge or was that an and one? I can't remember.
Which play are we talking about?
The one where Giannis gets hurt.
I don't know what the result of that play was, because everyone was just talking about Giannis getting hurt.
Regardless, that play is a result of the NBA rewarding defensive players sliding beneath offensive players already in the air, right? This is a thing that's been happening this season where the charge has been extended in this way where now if an offensive player is like just about to take off and you slide in right into the landing space and they fall on you and you're standing still, it's a charge. Now, while I'm for defensive players having more room to operate, more leniency to stop shots, I also don't agree that we should be allow this kind of play where some of the league's best players get hurt. On a very similar play, Ja Morant hurts his hand. That adds a wrinkle to that series. And in this series, Giannis lands directly on his back, and I'm pretty sure that messed him up. And I don't think he looked quite the same the rest of the series. So NBA, please do something about that. But we're not here to talk about that necessarily. We're talking about Jimmy Butler, because that man is dangerous. Now, Jeremy, as a Celtics fan, has played Jimmy Butler in the playoffs a number of times. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Tell us a little bit, as a fan of the other team watching Jimmy Butler tear you apart. What does it feel like?
I can do you one better. Jeff and I, last year, were looking at the Celtics and knowing that they had a very good team. They won Game 5 in Miami in the Eastern Conference Finals, and we said, screw it. We're taking our shot. We're going to Game 6. So we spent money and bought tickets and went to Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals, in which Jimmy Butler dropped, I want to say it was 48 points in a win. And he beat the Celtics to send it back to Miami for a Game 7. And that might be the loudest I've ever heard the Garden. I mean, the place was rocking from minute one. They wanted a reason to explode. They wanted a reason to get up and cheer. And it felt like every single time there was momentum building, the Celtics would cut it to a 5-point deficit. Jimmy Butler, jump shot. Jimmy Butler, and one. You keep on going down the list. He's not the most prolific 3-point shooter. I get it. But when it comes to the playoffs, this guy takes it to another level. And this is what you want from these big-time playoff performers. I think to a lesser degree, Al Horford's the same way, where he is not that good in the regular season, and you can see that he takes it up a notch in the playoffs. I would add that LeBron does it, obviously. Curry does it to a degree as well. Great players step up in big moments, and it's hard to find somebody in this current era that embodies that more than Jimmy Butler, because I think that guys like Curry and LeBron are so good in the regular season as well. They're still great in the playoffs. Jimmy Butler, you can almost physically see him just ratchet it up a notch in the playoffs, and it's really impressive to watch. This is what you root for as a sports fan. Big moments, big players step up.
I was watching the end of the Bucks game because I was watching, I think it was the Grizzlies. No, it might have been Kings Warriors or something like that. And you could see in the corner of the screen the score of the Bucks and Heat game. And the Bucks were winning by 15, 16 points at the end of the third quarter. And I thought, there's no reason to watch that game. And slowly the gap closed and narrows and narrows and narrows. And finally I decided to turn it on just in time to watch the Bucks' epic collapse. Giannis bricking free throws. He almost throws the ball away. And then Jimmy Butler makes the most spectacular shot I've ever seen. I mean, if that had happened in 2K, if you were playing 2K with your friends, and then the automatic inbounds plays to lob it up to Jimmy Butler, and then he makes a sideways shot as he's falling down, I would have been like, that is such bullshit. There's no way Jimmy Butler could do that in real life. And he did. And he sent it to overtime. The Bucks also had a chance to win in overtime, I felt like. They just totally gave the game away. I wanted to ask you from a team that had to deal with the Bucks, right? What happened in this series? How could they lose to a team of Jimmy Butler and undrafted guys? No Tyler Hero, basically nothing from Bam. What happened?
So I think coaching-wise, this was not a good series for Mike Budenholzer. There's a reason that he is now being called into question in his future in Milwaukee. People think that he could be fired. I don't necessarily think that that's unwarranted given what I saw in this playoff series. And I'll be the first to tell you that of all the playoff series that I watched, I feel like I watched the least of Nuggets and Timberwolves and Heat and Bucks. And even that Game 5 was on NBA TV. It didn't even get national television. So me and Jeff were watching through the Bucks broadcast. That game-tying shot to send it to overtime, they didn't really react. They were like, oh, and a nice shot by Jimmy Butler to tie the game. As if it wasn't just a ridiculous contorting his body in midair to hit the shot. It was an incredible make, and they were just like, and he hits the shot, and it looks like we're going overtime. And I was like, wow, way to really meet the moment there, guys. But to answer your question on why the Bucks collapsed, I think part of it is the defensive philosophy. Now, it seemed as if to me, and I am by no means a basketball expert, I don't necessarily know defensive coverages. You probably have to ask someone else a lot smarter than me for that. But it seemed to me as if their philosophy was, let's put our best defender in Drew Holiday on Jimmy Butler and let him get his and just try and shut down everybody else and make Jimmy beat you by himself. Well, that's exactly what he did. And it didn't feel like they adjusted from minute one till the end of the series. They just kept throwing Drew at him, and he kept making shots. Now, one could argue when you have a Defensive Player of the Year and a two-time MVP and Giannis sitting on the court for 3 of those 5 games, maybe you should use him on Jimmy Butler. And to that I say, great idea. I don't know why he wasn't. I don't know why you didn't send multiple guys and force the likes of Gabe Vincent and 85-year-old Kevin Love to try and beat you. Like, there were other opportunities that they had that they could have used, and it felt like Budenholzer was so set in his ways. He was like, nope, we're just going to do it. We're going to go for it. And a lot of these games were also kind of blowout-ish. Like, Game 2, the only game the Bucks won was an absolute stinker. They put up 120 points in 3 quarters. The Heat won Game 1, I'm pretty sure, pretty comfortably. Game 3, I think that they also blew out the Bucks in that game, too. So Game 4 was close. Jimmy Butler eked it out at the end, of course. Yeah, that was the 56-point game. And then Game 5 went to overtime. And even in the late game situations, there was, I think, 1.2 seconds left in regulation after Jimmy Butler made the insane game-tying shot in Game 5. Didn't call a timeout. At the end of overtime, Grayson Allen dribbles out the clock. Doesn't call a timeout. Like, there were
Right.
minute coaching adjustments that they could have made. Or even just, like what's going on in your brain type of moments where, you know. Now, I will say, as the caveat to all this, it was broken yesterday that Mike Budenholzer's brother died in a car crash during this series. So he obviously had something heavily on his mind. He may have disclosed it to the team. He may not have. But I wonder if they had a little bit better of a coaching philosophy, adjustments, game plan, whatever you want to say, I think it could have been different in the series. Certainly not a 5-game, a gentleman's sweep. Like, that's the most stunning part to me, is that this ended in 5 games for the Heat. I could have easily seen it the other way. There's no way I ever could have predicted a 5-game series and the Heat being the winners.
Giannis actually spoke about it after the game, and he was asked about the adjustments that were made. And they were asking him, like, did you make enough adjustments? And they're basically just hinting at, are you happy with Mike Budenholzer as your coach? And he was saying things like, oh, I don't know. I don't know why we didn't make enough adjustments. I don't know why we didn't try this. I don't know why we didn't try switching Drew off of Jimmy so that we could give him a break. I don't know why we didn't try double teaming him or try to get the ball out of his hands. And I got to be honest. If I'm the Bucks, I would be listening to Giannis, because this guy was asked a lot of tough questions after that game, and he handled himself like a true pro. I think he was asked a lot of, like, that question about failures. Is he's in a failure? He had that quote. Don't need to get into it. But Giannis making those comments is the best you'll get out of Giannis in terms of, we need a new coach. I think that's what he's trying to say. And I'm hoping that the Bucks, with a team that's so goddamn talented, I don't know how you lose to a bunch of undrafted guys. Like, I really don't know how you do that. You know, you have so much talent.
I will say, I think one of the problems now, again, the caveat is that I did not watch a whole lot of the series. Felt like the Bucks were missing a lot of 3-point shots. And when you don't have Giannis necessarily at full strength, you're going to need the three to win, and it didn't feel like they shot as well as they could have in this series. Their philosophy is also to give up the 3, and they'll stop at anything to keep you from getting to the bucket. That's why Brook Lopez is so effective, and the Heat took advantage. Like, I don't know. I think that the Heat were a scary 8 seed. We all laughed at them for losing to the Hawks in the play-in game, but clearly they wanted the Bucks, and clearly they were right. They matched up better with them, and hey, they took it to them. They won the series, so we can't knock that decision. I think that if you're going to look back on this series, this could be a seminal moment for the Bucks, and not in a good way. Number one, they're now the 6th 1 seed to ever lose to the 8 seed in the playoffs. It's never a good look. Never a good look for Giannis in particular. And speaking of Giannis, what does this series tell him about the Bucks' future? What if he looks at this and says, man, I did eke out that 1 championship with Milwaukee, and it was great. It was incredible, and I'm beloved there forever. Maybe I need to try something else now. Maybe I need to go somewhere else and try and win. It might not happen this year, but it could happen next year when I think he has only 1 year left on his deal. What if he decides he wants to leave? Think about the bidders for that. Like, Jeff would give up right now. I asked him this the other day. Jaylen Brown and 2 of White, Smart, Robert Williams. He'd give up 2 of them and a buttload of first-round picks to go and get Giannis and pair him with Tatum. And I'm sure almost everyone else in the league would do the exact same thing.
Giannis as a trade target it would just be madness. It would be an absolute madness.
He might be more valuable than KD was, and KD got 5 first-round picks and 3 really good players.
We'll see how the Suns turn out too. But we'll move on from the Bucks for a moment. Talk about the Grizzlies, the team that's good in the West. As my friend Lucas said, I think the Grizzlies are revoked of any gritty privileges for the next season. I think the way your season ended, from all the shit talking you were doing, I think it's really bad that you got kind of dismantled by the Lakers. I mean, you got put up. What was the lead at one point in the game last night? Like 40 points.
It finished as a 40-point blowout, 125 to 85.
It was just really, really, really embarrassing for the Grizzlies for the way the season ended. I mean, sure, we talk about Brandon Clark, talk about Steven Adams. They were missing those 2 key guys. And
I don't know how much of a difference that would have made.
Exactly. The size disparity was there, but I don't necessarily know if that was enough to swing the series, so to speak. So I want to talk about John Morant because he's still a player. I mean, it's not going to get any better as he gets older, but every time he falls down, every time he lands, I think, oh my gosh, it's over, right? There was a play, I think in game 4, where he tries to dunk it over LeBron, but LeBron, he's taking the charge, and John Morant,
he flipped.
He flips in the air, and he lands on his side, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this guy is so reckless with his body, and if anything, he's also a prime candidate for the Ewing theory. I mean, there's no better example in the modern day of team loses their best player, yet there's still that the team it actually does even better when he's gone. What's up with that? I looked at that Grizzlies team, and are you worried about them at all? I mean, they're a young team and all, but this is the second year in a row where they exit the playoffs way earlier than expected.
I don't know about way earlier for last year. I mean, last year they were the 2 seed, they lost to the Warriors. I don't necessarily feel that there's a shame in that. I don't necessarily know if there's a shame in losing to the Lakers, because I think the Lakers are very good. This is still the second youngest team in the NBA. I'm just looking that up right now. Still the second youngest team in the NBA. There's definitely a whole lot of room to grow, and more importantly for this group of Grizzlies, a lot of room to mature, and they're going to need to do it quickly. But if you have Jaren Jackson Jr. as now he will be the reigning Defensive Player of the Year. You still have Ja, you still have Bane, who are a damn good backcourt. I don't know necessarily where they rank among all NBA backcourts, but they got to be in the top 10 pretty comfortably. I'd say top 7. Dylan Brooks is probably going to be gone, which takes away a lot of the spotlight on your team. I think this team, the biggest step that this team needs to figure out, it's honestly very similar to the Celtics. They have to mature. This team has not won anything, and they feel and they act like they have. The Celtics still do it, and they still haven't won a damn thing. So this team needs a calming veteran presence. I think Steven Adams gives them that, but without having him on the court, it kind of loses a little bit of that this year. So maybe they go and get somebody else. I think Kyle Anderson was a really good influence on them last year, even though Rudy Gobert tried to punch him this year, and now he's gone in Minnesota. I think maturity will be, if the Grizzlies can mature, they're still, I mean, you saw them. This is now the second seed in the West 2 years in a row. I know the West wasn't as strong this year, but it's still an impressive accomplishment. So keep winning, figure out a way to kind of get it through your skulls that you don't need to talk so much. I'll give a shameless plug here, but The Athletic released an NBA player poll. They polled almost a third of the league, and one of the questions was, who is the biggest trash talker in the NBA? Now, Draymond Green ran away with this answer, and Patrick Beverley finished second, but 3 players, they didn't see each other's answers. 3 players picked the Grizzlies team as the biggest trash talker in the NBA, saying that they can talk all they want, but when they're losing, you don't hear anything from them. They can't back it up. And that was true in this series. They could not back anything up. They need to shut up and play better if they want to be able to talk like that.
I think they sort of put a target on their backs when they were making those kind of comments, the dancing, the celebrations, the post-game interviews where they're all together. It's really surprising, and we talked at the beginning of the pod about how quickly 2 years might feel, but 2 years ago, the Grizzlies were a beloved team. They were a beloved team, a bunch of young guys who, Desmond Bane was kind of like this
plucky underdogs.
Exactly. And then now all of a sudden, even though they kind of are underdogs, we hate them. I hate them. I don't want them to succeed. I feel like they're a bunch of arrogant, cocky guys, and John Morant's off-season stuff. I mean, off-the-court stuff was another discussion. We don't have to have that here, of course. But last takeaway from the Grizzlies is that after the game, Ja was asked about his comments about I'm fine in the West. And if there's anything hopeful to take away from the Grizzlies' disappointing end of the season, it was that Ja said, you know what, it was a distraction, that my off-court stuff was an issue, and it did impact the organization. And if you're a Grizzlies fan, you might look at that as a sign of humility, a sign of accountability, and that's what you need from your best player. You need your best player to set the tone both on and off the court about how to conduct yourself as a professional. So I wanted to take that moment to commend John Morant for at least showing some contrition and showing some maturity.
Yeah.
Some maturity. Last thing about the NBA real quickly, Game 7. Best 2 words in all of sports, Game 7. It's going to be in Sacramento. Golden State, been terrible on the road all year. Jeremy, what are you thinking about it right now?
I have been I've been a one-man army trying to fight this in my group chats. But I think the Warriors are going to win this series. I've said it from the beginning. I lean on experience in the playoffs. As much as I hate to admit it, I like this Kings team. I don't love them as much as some others do, Jeff. But Jeff has basically adopted them as a second team, and he's very he's not subtle about it. So I've been kind of like biding my time. I'll say I'm honestly happy when the Warriors win, because this has gotten to a point now where it's become the Vegas Golden Knights with the Kings. They're the first year the Golden Knights were in existence in hockey, they went to the Stanley Cup final. And their bandwagon was so damn big, I couldn't stand it, because everyone was like, Vegas, yeah, Vegas, I love them, man. And I'm like, guys, like, come on, let's have a little balance here. So, of course, me being the douche that I am, I went and supported the Capitals, and they won. So I'm kind of doing the same thing with the Kings here. They're a feel-good story, I get it. They're very fun to watch. I'm kind of done with them. The narrative has gotten old for me. So yeah, I think my favorite part about this series so far has been Draymond Green coming back into Sacramento for Game 5, getting pissed off that fans were booing him and dropping 20 and 7. This might be his best playoff performance in like 3 or 4 years. But yeah, Warriors. I'm taking the Warriors. I think that the moment is going to be a little too big for the Kings role players. I think Fox and Sabonis will still do very well in Game 7, but ultimately, this is the Warriors we're talking about. Do you know they've never lost a playoff series in the West under Steve Kerr? They've never done it.
They've never lost?
The only time that they've ever lost under Steve Kerr in the playoffs have been in the finals.
That is incredible. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, because the 2 years without Clay, they missed the playoffs 2 times, and they lost in the finals to LeBron and Kawhi.
When the Warriors went down 2-0, a lot of my friends, Warriors fans, because I'm group in the Bay Area, they talk about, we're going to get swept, and blah, blah, blah. But, weirdly for me, I remember the feeling when the Celtics went up 2-0 on the Warriors in the finals. I thought it was over too. But then, that was the goddamn finals. And still, the Warriors, when you have Steph Curry, you have Klay Thompson, you have these great players, and you have a great coach leading them with that experience, you can never count them out. They always have that puncher's chance in my head. And seeing the narrative switch from, like, no one believes in the Warriors, they might upset the Kings, to the Kings becoming this dominant force in the West, they're going to go to the finals. I felt like when that tide switched to the no one believes in the Warriors, I think that's when they're the most dangerous. And so Game 7, I also have the Warriors, but for perhaps a slightly different reason. If I'm the NBA, if I'm the league, if I'm Adam Silver, I'm like drooling over LeBron versus Steph Curry in round 2. That would be like the most amazing marketing thing of all time. Warriors, Lakers, like a really perennial franchise versus the, I guess, sort of the modern, new, and up-and-coming franchise that sort of sets the model for how to operate as an NBA franchise, how to take care of your players, how to draft, and
I like the way you're thinking, because you're thinking Scott Foster's rolling into Sacramento for Game 7. I like where your head's at.
I think that I'm not saying that the refereeing will be completely biased towards the Warriors.
I wouldn't be shocked.
But I wouldn't be shocked if a few calls leaned a little bit towards the Warriors' way.
Especially in big moments.
And, Kings fans, if you come out after the game and you have complaints about this, you are totally right. Because in, 2004 or whatever? 2001, the Lakers are playing the Kings in the Western Conference Finals. There was a bunch of seriously controversial calls. But we'll see how things shake out. Is it tonight? I think it's tonight, right? Game 7? Tomorrow. Game
tonight is Suns-Nuggets, the first game. It's
Wow.
the only game tonight. It's for Game 1.
Well, we're going to see Warriors take on the Kings in Game 7 tomorrow. We're going to take a break and we'll come back talking about AI and Post-Grad Life. All right, we're back. We're talking here about Post-Grad Life. So Jeremy and I have been graduated for about, almost a year and a half, 2 years-ish?
Yeah.
So I graduated a semester early. I started working at the beginning of 2022. I was a wedding video editor for the first year. I worked from home a lot. It was a really big adjustment, and I felt like I want to take a moment to sort of talk about what life has been like from a big picture standpoint as someone who recently left college. I guess I'll swing it to you, Jeremy. Jeremy, you lived in Boston. You're from the East Coast. You're in the city. What's it been like for you?
So, without giving necessarily away where I work, because I'm not allowed to broadcast it super freely, I'll say I work in sports. As you know, just because, I talk about sports for a living. Now, I wanted to talk about sports for a living. Now I tweet about sports for a living. So, I can't necessarily complain. I still think it's a dream job. I will say one of the fun parts about it is when I can tell people that I do this, and they go whoa, that's a sick job. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I fully understand how lucky I am. Like you, I started working mid-December 2021, so I actually had my first day of work, had my last classes the next day, and then went to work full-time. I really haven't had any break since. It's definitely different. I completely agree with you that there is a mindset shift. I don't want to necessarily talk for 2.5 minutes about this before you have a chance to break in. So I'll say this, and then I'll let you kind of riff off of it. But one of the biggest changes is the fact that I work from home, and it really feels like you can relate when you started with the wedding planning editing, or the wedding video editing, excuse me. Like, your home is now your office, and there's definitely you have to have a good mindset when it comes to I'm going to do work and I'm not going to do it, because it's so easy to be like, let me just pop on the computer and grab some stuff,
I totally agree. And I think that was the biggest challenge for me as someone who started working and was only working from home, was there was no separation between my personal life and my work life, because it literally happened in the exact same space, happened in my bedroom. I would just be sitting here all day editing videos, and then my room no longer felt like a place to relax in, so to speak. And that created a whole bunch of issues for me, where I was kind of like, is this what life is like for the rest of my life? Is just wake up and just sit in my room for hours, watch the sun rise and set, and then go outside to go to get groceries or something like that. I think the biggest difference, I think maybe something I took for granted as someone who was in college, was just being surrounded by so many people my age, and having a consistent cycle of new faces. You have different classes, you live in different dorm rooms. Those things, those aspects of college I sort of took for granted. I didn't realize that after college, you might be the youngest person at work by far.
I am. I 100% am. I always freak people out because you have the same. You're just like me. You were born in 2000, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That number freaks people out more than anything I've ever seen. Because they'll be like, "How old are you?" Because you look kind of young. I'll be like, "I'm 22. I was born in 2000." And they just go, what are you talking about? I work with someone who's born in 2000. I'm so old." And I'm like, "Guys, I promise you." And my team, the people that I work with in immediate proximity, the oldest person is around 32, I think. Not even. I have a very young team because we're based in social media, but it freaks people out, and I completely agree with you. You don't meet how generally speaking, like you will meet new people, but the frequency with which you meet them goes down drastically after you leave school. It just
Right.
basically nosedives off a cliff. And that could be anybody. That could be like new people on the street, whatever. It really doesn't matter. It's just the exposure that you get to the outside world, especially when you're working from home, is so different. Or even just working in general with, let's say you go into the office, like you meet your coworkers. I get that, but it's just a whole different animal. One of the other differences that I wanted to touch on is just the fact that I feel like there's less time. College definitely encouraged you to be creative. Like they encouraged you to try and test different things. And I enjoyed doing that. It's part of why, I know how to use Photoshop now. I know how to use Premiere to a certain extent. You obviously a lot more skilled than I am, but I still try. Like, there's no, once I feel like you get into working life, you get very conditioned into the sense that like, why am I doing this if it's not making me money? And that sounds really bad, but there is a certain thing where it's like, okay, I have the one thing that I cannot get more of is time. And that sounds cliche, but it's true. So how am I going to spend my time to best maximize, my happiness, my life in general? Do I want to go and work this extra hour on this project that'll get me some more money so that way I can go and buy, insert whatever you want, a ticket to a sporting event? Or do I want to go and play video games for 2.5 hours? And sometimes that's still a very acceptable answer. Sometimes you need to unplug, but I definitely feel when it comes to being creative, trying new things, your time is definitely minimized in that regard.
I think the biggest difference is in high school, I felt like I would wake up at like 7, 8 in the morning, and I would like go to class all day. I go to baseball practice, then I come home, I do homework for a few hours, and I would still like stay up late at night. And then it would be like I'd stay up till 2, 3 in the morning, and I could wake up the next day and I could do it all over again. And then in college, I'd have
and I would add with that, you still felt like you were super busy, just like your parents were. Like they were doing their thing, but you were also very busy because you didn't have a full scope of like everything that you need to do.
Exactly. And then now after college and everything, after the workday, I'm exhausted. I'm mentally worn out to some degree. Even though not every day is mentally taxing as all the rest, there are definitely days where I'm like, it hits 5:30, it hits 6 o'clock, and I kind of hit a wall, and I'm like, I kind of want to go to bed. And it's hard because you also want time to relax, to have that leisure, to have that mental space, the break between work and your life. And it's hard to actually feel like the amount of time you get at the end of the day is enough to feel relaxed, to feel fulfilled in that sense. Like, I'm sure you can agree, sometimes when you have a crazy schedule, sometimes I gotta wake up at like 5:30, 6:30 in the morning to get to work. And that means I have to go to bed around 10:30, 9:30 sometimes to get enough sleep. And it's weird feeling like going from, I can stay up all night, I can hang out with my friends, we can watch, WandaVision or whatever. You go from hanging out all night to like, no, I have to go to sleep now because I gotta make sure I'm like straight for work.
I think about what we did when we were in college. Like there were nights that I would go to sleep around like 4:30 in the morning. And yeah, those were still few and far between. If you told me to stay up until 4:30 in the morning, now, not a chance in hell. Like there's no way. I think one of the other things that my particular job, it becomes a problem where I have Thursday, Friday off days, and part of my issue now when it comes to work-life balance is just the fact that like I don't feel everyone else and their grandmother's working Thursdays and Fridays. And so those are my off days and I'm going to try and take them, but it's hard not to still feel like you're plugged in because the rest of society has Monday through Friday work days. Then when you get to the weekend and I have to work the weekends, it's very painful because it feels like everyone is doing stuff and you're just kind of sitting there like, like it's the meme of Squidward inside his house looking at SpongeBob and Patrick playing. And he's like, he can't do anything. But like, I to finish up on the creative bit, because I still think it's important. If anyone is listening now that's kind of in our position where it's, you're leaving college, you're heading into the workforce type of thing, I would still encourage you not to lose that bit. Like, still try things. I still do it now. I do my best to still be as creative as I can. Sometimes it's not always possible. Sometimes I want to punt my laptop out the window. But, like, when you can do it, you're still broadening your horizons to a degree. I think social media has definitely conditioned us to think that, like, you have to be addicted to whatever, quote, the grind is. And, like, yes, you do want to work hard. Yes, you do want to feel fulfilled at the end of the day that you have tried hard, you've worked hard to get to a certain point. But there has to come a time where you know that you're going to hit burnout if you keep going, and you have to be able to take a step back. Now, I should follow my own advice more. I don't, but I guide people, I guide others to a treasure I cannot possess. Seriously, take this time. 'Cause I can't do it. It's
Wow.
it's a real problem.
He brought out the Red Skull quote. I really
Yeah.
I gotta commend you for that. That very well timed. I think I want to just sort of end this on a positive note, kind of like this very downer sort of topic. I guess some of the bigger takeaways, like in the year or so that I've been doing this, actually really quickly, as people who did not take like the trip to Europe, the post graduation trip, looking back on it, I'm kind of like FOMO a little bit, like, oh, maybe I should have done that.
A little bit.
But at the same time, I didn't feel right. I could not ask my parents for like 10 G's to go travel.
No,
around.
and you wouldn't have wanted to spend your own 10 grand to go on that
Exactly,
trip. I
right.
totally know where you're coming from. And the uplifting part about this for me, from my personal experience, is that, like, I don't know, there is a certain, there's obviously a price tag attached with whatever college you go to. And there is that worry, at least in the back of my mind, that says, like, am I making the right choice shelling out this money for this institution to try and go and learn these things? And yeah, well, maybe I did major in journalism, and I don't necessarily write articles now. Like, I don't do that. But the institution allows me to use the Adobe suite, would be the biggest thing that I learned. And you can teach yourself stuff in college that now I get to this point and I look back and I can say, like, yeah, okay, it was definitely, like, it wasn't cheap. Never cheap to go to college anymore, but I can say that I'm putting it to good use. Like, there was a point in me going, I guess, would be my main takeaway. And I'm getting paid to do things that I like to do. That's honestly the best thing that I can say about my job. Like, I'm not stuck in a cubicle trying to go and figure out accounting spreadsheets. Like, that would be miserable. I enjoy what I do. I use the college education to do what I do, and I'm still going to try and improve upon it as I go along in life.
I think Jeremy and I were also people in very fortunate positions because, you know, in terms of what we're doing, it's so closely in line with what we eventually want to do. So, you know, I like you, I feel very fortunate to have a job out of college. I know so many of my peers are having a lot of trouble finding work. So I think actually getting that head start and not taking that like summer break after college, so to speak, to sort of like figure out what I want to do after graduation. I think
and not falling into the trap of wanting to go to grad school. I know a bunch of my friends who have done that, where it's like, you know, I don't want to leave the college mindset. I don't want to leave college lifestyle now. So let me just go to grad school and dump an extra $100,000 on it. It's like, no, don't do that. Seriously, trust that the work that you've put in is worth it. The initiative that you took in school is worth it. And if it's not, that's on you. But if it is, trust your gut and trust in yourself and try and go for it, because it's totally worth it.
It is totally worth it. And I think working has been really rewarding. I've learned so much more than I did in time at school and stuff like that. But I guess sort of to end this on a high note, some of the things that I've learned as someone who's sort of getting used to the post-grad life is really find your routine. I think there are some kinds of routines that can drive you crazy, that can drive you mad. But there's a lot of good habits you want to build as an adult. And I think, so one thing that I've really developed is I've developed a morning routine where every day I start the day the same way, and it helps me get into the headspace of like, no, the day is beginning, we're out of bed, and we gotta get going. So what I do every day, first thing my alarm goes off, I take a cold rinse in the shower. And people might be like, that's crazy, you're a crazy person for getting in the shower and it's cold. But weirdly, you don't have to take like a full shower, just kind of get in, just so the shock of the cold water hits you, you get out, you dry off, you brush your teeth, wash your face, I stretch for a little bit. That's like 20 minutes to start the day, and you feel like mentally ready to go. Jeremy, have you like figured out any sort of like routines? Have you implemented any sort of like different kind of habits since graduating that have helped you with your post-grad life?
I mean, having a consistent sleep schedule helps a ton. I'll start there.
Goodness, 100%.
Like, you can afford in college to go to bed at like random hours, or maybe like take a nap every once in a while, and you can still do that in the professional sphere, but it's definitely not as flexible because you have commitments that you need to hit or deadlines that you need to make. So sleep schedule, 100% the most important thing. I try and go to sleep at a certain point every single night and know that I wake up around the same time every day. And it started to get to the point where now I'm starting to feel like a boomer, where I'll wake up without my alarm. I'll beat my alarm up even on days that I'm not working. But I'm like, it's honestly nicer to wake up without the alarm. You're not jolted awake by the dinging or whatever ringtone that you have. You wake up nice and you're like, man, well, all right, let's go. I usually scroll on my phone for like 10, 15 minutes before I actually get out of bed and get ready to go and do stuff. But I would also say that even at night, preparing for the next day has been massive for me. So in my job, we can only work with whatever stuff we're going to get the next day. I prep that the night before. So because I know when I come in, sometimes I'm not all the way there in the morning. Sometimes, let's say I didn't sleep well, something like that. Insert, maybe I went to bed late. If I have that stuff already ready and loaded, it takes such a stress off of me in the morning that it sets my tone for the rest of the day. If I can start with an organized start to the day, especially in the workflow, it really does help. I eat around the same time every single day. I go for a walk after I get out of work, because normally I've been sitting for 8 hours. I'm hoping to get a standing desk to change that, but still, like, I'll go for a walk for 40 minutes, listen to whatever I want to listen to, my usual program, whether it be sports radio, whether it be a podcast. Like, I completely agree. Routine-based stuff is huge, for especially when you work from home, because you are self-motivating to a certain extent.
I think the biggest thing you realize is that you have so much control over the things going on in your life. Like, if you feel anxious because you're looking at your phone too much, just stop looking at your phone. It's really that simple. If you feel like you're not eating healthy enough, you just got to go out and just get a banana or whatever. There are things that in college you feel like are big adult things that you don't have to quite figure out yet. But then once you graduate and it's like you have a job, it's like, no, this is all on you now. So I guess to sort of sign off here on the Dry Line podcast, just saying, if you're out there and you're about to join the post-grad life, if you're just getting started into it, or maybe if you're even 20 years deep, just know that every day is different. Every day is a new day, and the problems of yesterday are yesterday's problems. And with that, I want to thank you, Jeremy, for hopping on the podcast. You want to go ahead and drop your socials if you have any?
Yeah, sure. At Jeremy C. Guerin on Twitter and Instagram, JeremyCguerin. Thanks for having me, Anton. I'm happy to be back sometime, too.
I'm definitely going to have you back on. This is definitely one of our better episodes. So thank you to all those who stuck around and listened to us talk about basketball and post-grad life and all that sort of stuff in between. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Take care.